If you've ever watched someone you love get erased in real time, you know that sinking feeling in your chest. The applause started before I could breathe. My daughter-in-law stood at the microphone in a ballroom filled with 3 generations of my family, and she just told 200 people that I was too old to matter. The Houston Hotel ballroom was decorated for a celebration. White roses on every table, string lights hanging from the ceiling like frozen stars. My nephew's wedding reception was supposed to be about love, about family, about carrying forward the best of what we built. But Tiffany had other plans. She stood up there in a champagne-colored dress with a microphone in one hand and a glass of wine in the other, and she smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile you practice in a mirror when you're rehearsing a performance. "I want to take a moment," she began, her voice smooth and confident, "to talk about the Sinclair Family Scholarship Trust." My heart stopped. That trust was my life's work. 32 years of fundraising, of sending students to college, of honoring my late husband's dream that no child in our community would be held back by money. "Mrs. Mildred Sinclair has done incredible work," Tiffany continued, her tone dripping with false gratitude. "But as many of you know, she's getting older, and with age comes limitations." I sat frozen in my chair. My son Simon stood next to her, his eyes locked on the floor. He wouldn't look at me. "So effective immediately," Tiffany announced. "I'll be taking over leadership of the trust. Fresh energy, new ideas, a vision for the future." The room erupted in applause. Not everyone. Some of my former students looked uncomfortable. A few cousins glanced at me with confusion. But the younger generation, Simon's friends, Tiffany's circle, they clapped like she'd just announced a promotion. I noticed things. Small things. The kind of details you see when the world slows down and your brain goes into survival mode. Tiffany was wearing a Cartier bracelet I'd never seen before. It caught the light every time she gestured. Simon kissed her cheek when she sat down. His hand shook. My cousin Deanna, in the back row, pulled out her phone and started recording. Someone at the next table whispered, "About time someone stepped in." I sat there, 71 years old, a retired school principal who'd taught for 40 years, raised 2 sons, built a scholarship fund from $10,000 to $500,000. And I was being erased in front of my entire family. Your legacy can vanish in one speech. Subscribe so you recognize the setup before it happens. But here's what they didn't see. What Tiffany didn't count on. I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I didn't make a scene. I just watched. And I remembered every single detail. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, a question was forming. A question that would unravel everything Tiffany thought she'd built. The cameras kept flashing. Simon kissed his wife's cheek. And I realized this wasn't spontaneous. This was choreographed. The question was, how long had they been planning? My house key didn't work. After 43 years in the home my husband and I built, I stood on my own porch like a stranger waiting for permission to enter. It was Monday morning, 2 days after the wedding. I'd gone to my cardiologist appointment in Shreveport like I did every month. Routine checkup, blood pressure, heart rhythm. The doctor said everything looked stable. I came home to find my life had been locked away from me. I tried the key 3 times, jiggled it. Thought maybe the lock was sticky from the humidity, but no, the mechanism didn't even catch. This wasn't my lock anymore. I knocked. Felt ridiculous knocking on my own door, but what choice did I have? Tiffany opened it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Mildred," she said, voice sweet as poison. "We upgraded the security system. Didn't Simon tell you?" No. Simon hadn't told me anything. Simon hadn't called me since the wedding. I stepped inside. My inside. Except it didn't feel like mine anymore. The furniture had been moved. My reading chair, the one my husband bought me for our 25th anniversary, was gone. In its place sat a modern gray couch I'd never seen before. Simon came down the stairs carrying a box. My box. The one filled with my teaching awards and family photos. "We're just making some updates, Ma," he said, still not meeting my eyes. "You'll love it." Tiffany walked me down the hallway. My hallway. Past the living room where I used to grade papers. Past the dining room where we hosted 40 Thanksgivings. She stopped at the guest room. "We've set this up for you," she said brightly. "Much easier than those stairs to the master bedroom. At your age, we don't want you falling." I was 71, not 90. I walked 3 miles every morning, but she was already opening the door like the decision had been made without me. The guest room was 12 feet from what used to be my sewing room. Now it had a desk, a filing cabinet, and Tiffany's laptop. "My home office," she explained. "So convenient, right? I can keep an eye on you." Keep an eye on me like I was a child, like I was a problem to manage. That night, I sat in the guest room, my new prison, and tried to process what was happening. Simon brought me dinner on a tray, still wouldn't look at me. Then Tiffany knocked. She held out 2 pills and a glass of water. "Your new heart medication," she said. "The doctor prescribed these this morning." I stared at the pills, small, white, unmarked. I hadn't been prescribed anything new. My cardiologist would have told me. The bottles in Tiffany's hand had no pharmacy labels, no prescription stickers, nothing. "Take them," she said, her smile hardening. "Doctor's orders." I took the glass. I did not take the pills. The email arrived at 3:47 a.m. Subject line, "Transaction alert, Kansas City." I didn't have accounts in Kansas City. I'd never even been to Kansas City. I couldn't sleep. How could I? I was lying in a guest room in my own house, listening to Tiffany's voice drift through the walls as she talked on the phone, laughing at something I couldn't hear. So I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through emails I'd been ignoring. That's when I saw it. Transaction alert. First National Bank of Kansas City. Withdrawal, $12,000. My hands went cold. I didn't bank in Kansas City. I'd used the same credit union in Shreveport for 30 years. I opened my banking app, tried to log in. Access denied. I tried again. Same message. Account access restricted. Please contact your branch. My stomach turned. I scrolled further. More emails. Ones I'd never opened because they looked like spam. Credit card application approved. Congratulations on your new account. Furniture purchase confirmation. Delivery scheduled to 4782 Oakwood Drive, Shreveport. That was my address. Account statement. Metro West Financial Services. I'd never heard of Metro West Financial Services. Every email used my name, my social security number, my address, but I hadn't applied for anything, hadn't bought anything, hadn't authorized a single transaction. CTA number 2, one signature they forge and you disappear. Subscribe to catch the warning signs early. I got out of bed, paced the tiny guest room. My heart was racing and not in the way my cardiologist would approve of. I tried calling the bank. Automated message. Our offices are closed. Please call back during business hours. I tried the credit card company. Same thing. Then I heard it. Tiffany's voice from downstairs. She was still on the phone. It was almost 4 a.m. and she was wide awake, talking to someone in a low, excited voice. I cracked open my door, listened. "No, she has no idea," Tiffany said, laughing. "I told you, she's too old to even check her accounts. By the time she figures it out, it'll be done." My blood went cold. I closed the door silently, sat back down on the bed, opened my email trash folder, the one where deleted messages go to die. And there, buried underneath pharmacy spam and grocery coupons, I found it. A receipt from a notary service in Little Rock, Arkansas. Services rendered, document authentication, and signature verification. The attached image showed a scanned document, my signature, perfect, flawless, exactly like the one I'd used for 40 years. But I hadn't signed anything. I zoomed in on the signature, the loops, the pressure points, the angle of the letters. It looked exactly like mine, but I hadn't signed anything in months. Someone had practiced. Someone had studied my signature so carefully they could recreate it perfectly, and that someone was sleeping 20 feet away from me, in my bedroom, in my house. The notification buzzed at breakfast. Cloud storage upload complete. I didn't upload anything. Then I remembered my nephew installed that app 2 years ago, and I never deleted it. Tuesday morning. Tiffany made me oatmeal, set it down in front of me with that same practiced smile. "Eat up," she said. "You need your strength." I ate in silence. Simon had already left for work. Tiffany sat across from me, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up to make sure I was eating. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. Cloud backup complete. 47 items uploaded. I frowned. I didn't use cloud storage. Didn't even know how. But then I remembered. 2 years ago, my nephew Carl came over to fix my phone after I dropped it. He installed some apps. Said they'd keep my photos safe. I'd forgotten all about it. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. Tiffany's eyes followed me as I walked back to the guest room and closed the door. I opened the Cloud app. Took me 3 tries to remember the password. Carl had written it down on a sticky note. I still had it tucked in my Bible. The app loaded, folders upon folders of photos. Most of them I recognized. Family reunions, church events, my garden. But at the bottom, there was a folder labeled Recent Uploads. I clicked it. 47 videos, all filmed accidentally, I assumed, when my phone was in my purse or on a table. I started scrolling. Most were black screens or muffled audio, but then I saw one with a thumbnail that made my breath catch. The Shreveport Public Library, 2 months ago, February 9th. I clicked play. The video was shaky. My phone must have been propped up against something, recording without me knowing. The angle showed a table near the back of the library, and there was Tiffany. She was sitting alone, a stack of blank forms in front of her. Notary forms, legal documents, and a piece of paper with my signature on it. I watched, frozen, as she practiced. Over and over, tracing my signature, writing it freehand, comparing it to the original. Then her phone rang. She answered on speaker. "Yeah, I'm almost done," she said, her voice casual, cold. "Once the old woman's out of the way, we liquidate the trust and move to Austin." The voice on the other end laughed. A man. I didn't recognize him. "You sure she won't notice?" he asked. "Please," Tiffany scoffed. "She's 71 and clueless. I've already started the paperwork. The house, the trust, the insurance. It's all getting transferred. She built it, but she'll never see a dime." My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I hit pause, stared at the timestamp. February 9th. Simon proposed to Tiffany on February 14th, Valentine's Day. He told me it was spontaneous, love at first sight, a whirlwind romance. But she'd been planning this 5 days before he even proposed. Tiffany's voice on the recording was ice. "She built it, but she'll never see a dime. The paperwork's already filed." I hit pause. The timestamp read February 9th. Simon proposed to Tiffany on February 14th. The legal aid office smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. I clutched my phone like evidence at a crime scene. The attorney looked at me once and said 2 words, "Elder fraud." Wednesday afternoon, I'd barely slept in 2 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tiffany's face in that library video, practicing my signature like it was a school assignment. I couldn't stay in that house, couldn't sit across from her at breakfast pretending I didn't know. So I told Tiffany I had a church meeting. She didn't question it, probably thought I was harmless. Too old to matter. I took the bus to Atlanta, 3-hour ride. I'd found the legal aid office online, Southern Elder Justice Project. They specialized in financial exploitation cases. The waiting room was full, older folks mostly, some with family members, some alone like me. We all had the same look in our eyes, betrayal, confusion, fear. "Mildred Sinclair?" A woman appeared in the doorway, 40s, sharp suit, kind eyes. I followed her into a small office. She sat down, opened a notepad, and looked at me directly. "I'm Annalise Dubois," she said. "Tell me everything." I did. The wedding, the lockout, the pills with no labels, the emails, the video. Annalise didn't interrupt. She just took notes. Fast, efficient handwriting that filled 3 pages. When I finished, I pulled out my phone and showed her the library video. She watched it twice. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten. "Mrs. Sinclair," she said quietly, "this is elder fraud, financial exploitation, and it's a felony." The word hit me like cold water. Felony. Not a family disagreement, not a misunderstanding. A crime. "How much access does she have to your accounts?" Annalise asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I can't even log into my own banking app anymore." Annalise wrote something down, circled it twice. "Do you have copies of any legal documents, property deeds, trust paperwork, insurance policies?" "Some," I said, "but most of it's at the house, in my office, which is now Tiffany's office." Annalise nodded, pulled out her phone and made a call. "Without proof, it's just your word. Subscribe. I'll show you what documentation saves lives." "Darius, it's Annalise. I need a forensic accountant, today if possible." She listened for a moment, glanced at me. "Yes, elder exploitation, digital fraud, forged signatures, the whole package." She hung up and closed her notepad. "Mrs. Sinclair, I'm going to be very direct with you. Based on what you've told me and what I've seen in that video, this isn't just about your daughter-in-law stealing from you. This is organized, premeditated, and if she's done it to you, there's a good chance she's done it to others." My stomach dropped. Annalise closed her notepad. "I'm calling a forensic accountant. If there's a digital trail, Darius will find it. And Mrs. Sinclair, this might be bigger than your family." The accountant never looked up from his laptop. "These documents," he said, typing so fast his keys rattled, "were created from the same IP address as a case I reviewed in Little Rock. Thursday morning in Memphis, Darius Moore looked more like a teacher than any number cruncher I'd met. Calm. Precise. He set up 2 computers, a stack of hard copies beside him. He requested every scrap of evidence Annalise and I could bring. Videos, PDFs, the scanned signature receipt, Tiffany's emails I'd forwarded to myself. Darius showed me the trail of trackable data, metadata, hidden within each file. Timestamps, document history showing pieces changed at 2:03 a.m., 4:17 p.m., times Tiffany was alone in the house or at her so-called office. He pulled up a spreadsheet. Wire transfers. Transfers at odd hours, always under $10,000 to avoid attention. He flagged triggers that matched patterns he'd seen before. The deeper he searched, the sicker I felt. Document after document showed up. Property deeds with my forged signature, letters to banks, insurance forms, all with digital fingerprints that pointed not only to Tiffany, but to internet connections in Arkansas, Texas, even Missouri. "You see here?" He hovered over a string of numbers. "This IP address pops up in at least 6 cases I worked in the past 18 months. Notary stamps, too." Darius pulled up eBay receipts. Tiffany had bought 3, all for different states. He found a list of fake Social Security numbers registered to P.O. boxes. "Why would she do this to us?" I asked, the question coming out small. He didn't give me false comfort. He just showed me his research. One catch. Her emails weren't just about our family trust. One folder, labeled with a date before Simon and Tiffany even met, showed her transferring money from an account in Shreveport to another named Scholarship Renewal. But the recipients were always different, older women. He turned the screen. 12 names. Same fake notary. Same transfer amount, same address. "Mrs. Sinclair, you're number 9. That landed hard. 9 was never my lucky number. "There's more to find, and I will, but you have to know. You aren't alone, and you aren't the first." I left with copies of every file and Annalise's promise they'd call me the second they discovered more. Darius pulled up a spreadsheet. 12 names, 12 elderly women, 12 identical document templates. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said quietly, "you're number 9. Annalise's email hit my inbox at 2 a.m. 5 attachments, subject line, pattern confirmed. property transfers, insurance beneficiary changes, and chillingly, a cremation request, dated 3 weeks in the future. Friday evening, I sat at her office with Darius, our desks crowded with folders, laptops, and empty coffee cups. We mapped out each move Tiffany had made, a home equity loan for $127,000 rubber-stamped in a single afternoon, insurance policies shifting the beneficiary from Simon to Tiffany dated months ago, credit cards maxed out for spa trips, new clothes, hotel suites, every luxury you can think of. But what made my hands shake most wasn't the money. It was finding out that a call had been placed to the insurer asking about death benefit payout, just 6 days after Tiffany first met Simon. Darius explained how a person can build an entire alternate life under someone else's name if they're careful with signatures and know the right forms. The fact that my information was being moved, traded, or sold without my knowledge made me feel both violated and foolish. Annalise laid out the backup plan that terrified me most. In the stack of paperwork was a power of attorney form, backdated, giving Tiffany control should something happen to me medically. She could make healthcare calls, approve or refuse treatment. They research you before they meet you. Subscribe to learn the pattern they follow. Annalise said quietly, "If something happened to you in that house, she could refuse treatment. Legally." I pushed the paperwork away, my head spinning. Darius reached over, steady, and said, "You stopped this. No one else did." The final document was a power of attorney form, backdated, giving Tiffany medical decision authority. "If something happened to you in that house," Annalise said, her voice tight, "she could refuse treatment, legally." The judge took 11 seconds. "Motion granted," she said, and brought the gavel down so hard the court reporter flinched. Monday morning, courthouse. Annalise and Darius stood with me, their confidence helping me keep my shaking hands steady. Tiffany arrived with her lawyer, late and unprepared. The judge barely let him finish stammering through his opening. Annalise played the video of Tiffany at the library. Darius presented his findings, backing every charge with timestamps, receipts, and emails. The judge didn't hesitate. She granted a restraining order, ordered Tiffany removed from the house within 72 hours, froze all family assets Tiffany could touch, barred her from representing the trust, my accounts, or my property. Tiffany's face went white. She looked at Simon, her voice only a mutter. Simon couldn't look at anyone. For the first time since the wedding, Tiffany's mask dropped, and she just looked scared. Later that day, I stood outside my home while uniformed sheriff's deputies walked Tiffany and her things to her car. I felt two things at once, deep relief and a strange sadness. Was this really the girl my son had fallen for? Someone who could turn a family into a battlefield? Inside, the house was quiet. My office was still a mess, but with Tiffany gone, I felt space return to my lungs. Tiffany's face went white. She turned to Simon, mouthing something I couldn't hear. He looked at his shoes. For the first time since the wedding, I saw fear in her eyes. Tiffany's attorney walked into the conference room with a leather briefcase and a confident smile. 10 minutes later, he was packing up in silence. Wednesday afternoon at Annalise's downtown office. Tiffany arrived expecting to set the terms. She slouched in her seat, arms crossed, lips pursed. I watched, stone still. I was done being polite. Annalise began the meeting quietly. "We have evidence you should review before we move forward." She played the video. Tiffany shifted, but said nothing. Then Darius projected the PDF, the digital chain from Tiffany's email, the eBay receipt for the notary stamps, the IP addresses, the wire transfer logs, all traced to Tiffany's accounts or her devices. Her lawyer's confidence evaporated. He called for a break. When he came back, he looked 10 years older. The negotiation that followed wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender. We told them exactly what we wanted: return the stolen funds, cooperate with federal investigators, and sign affidavits about Tiffany's role in every documented crime. The attorney cleared his throat. What are your client's demands? Annalise didn't blink. She slid a single typed sheet across the table. Full restitution, federal cooperation, and your client testifies against her partners. Tiffany tried to protest. This was all a mistake, she said, her eyes darting to Simon, who had come to the meeting silent the whole time. Darius countered calmly. You had the means, the method, and the motive. You left a digital path in every single file. Simon spoke for the first time, voice low. Tell the truth, Tiff. It's over. For a single second, she looked like she might cry, but instead she whispered, Fine. Her lawyer signed the agreement. The entire room exhaled. On her way out, she glanced back at me. Not hate, maybe regret, or more likely, fear of what came next. What are your client's demands? Tiffany's attorney asked, his voice hollow. Annalise slid a single sheet across the table. Full restitution, federal cooperation, and your client testifies against her partners. The FBI agent laid 6 case files on Annalise's desk. Same notary, same templates, same Kansas City account. Your client's evidence just connected them all. Thursday morning felt different than the rest. Federal badge on the table. Agent Rivera from Financial Crimes. Calm, direct, every word clipped short, like she'd been through this dozens of times. She showed us the files. Black widows from Louisiana, Texas, and Arkansas. Romance scams. Real estate transfers with false affidavits. Health proxies that locked people out of their own care. 3 victims ended up homeless. 1 didn't survive. Her paperwork pre-signed. Cremation ordered before she even passed. Rivera thanked me for coming forward. A lot of victims never see justice, she said, and the families never get closure. Your testimony will help break the cycle. She walked us through how Tiffany's pattern fit an entire ring. A document mill in Kansas City, a ringleader still at large, a dozen other widows probably on their list. She warned me that I would need to testify, but my digital evidence would carry the weight. Darius would support with the forensic trail. If the pattern worked once, they'll repeat it. Subscribe. Protect your community from the playbook. Rivera pulled out the last folder, a photo of a woman named Doris Patterson, 72, from Texarkana, lost her home, died of a heart attack 3 months after being evicted by forged power of attorney. I stared at Doris's photo and asked myself, if I hadn't fought back, would that have been me? Would anyone have believed me without proof? The agent nodded at my question like she'd heard it before. The difference between a victim and a survivor is what you do next. Agent Rivera opened the last file. A photo of a woman, 72, from Texarkana. Doris Patterson, she said. Heart attack, 3 months after losing her home. The same notary's signature is on her deed transfer. The settlement offer came by courier at 6:15 p.m. Full restitution, $75,000 in damages, no federal charges. All I had to do was stay silent. Friday evening. I sat in Annalise's office with Agent Rivera across from me, the envelope between us like a test I hadn't studied for. Tiffany's legal team had made their move. They knew the federal case was strong. They knew testimony from me and Simon would seal her fate, so they tried to buy my silence. Annalise laid out the terms clearly. Full restitution means every dollar taken from your accounts gets returned. The $75,000 covers emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive damages. You walk away whole, financially speaking, Agent Rivera added. But if you take this deal, Tiffany serves minimal state time. The other victims, they get nothing. The fraud ring, it keeps operating. I stared at the paper. The numbers were real, life-changing even. I could rebuild the scholarship fund, secure my future, close this chapter, and never think about Tiffany again. My phone buzzed. Simon. Ma, please, take the deal. Let this end. I can't watch you go through a trial. His voice cracked. My son caught between guilt and exhaustion. I hung up without answering. Agent Rivera slid a photo across the table. Doris Patterson, 72, Texarkana, dead 3 months after losing her home to the same fraud scheme. She had no one to fight for her, Rivera said softly. You do, and more importantly, you can fight for the others who come after. I picked up the photo, studied Doris's face. She looked kind, the kind of woman who baked for neighbors, who taught Sunday school, who trusted people because that's what decent people do. Tiffany had stolen that trust, turned it into a weapon, and if I stayed quiet, she'd do it again. Maybe not to me, but to someone's mother, someone's grandmother. I looked at Doris Patterson's photo on the table. 72 years old, dead. I pushed the settlement back across the table. Schedule the testimony. Every victim deserves their day. Simon knocked on the door he used to walk through freely. He was holding a box, hands shaking, unable to meet my eyes. Saturday morning, 2 weeks after I rejected the settlement. I'd moved back into my house. The locks were changed, this time by me. The guest room was mine again. My office, my kitchen, my life. Simon stood on the porch like a stranger, which in a way he'd become. "Ma," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "can I come in?" I opened the door wider, let him step inside. He carried a wooden box, handmade polished oak with brass hinges. "I made this," he said, setting it on the table. "Took me 3 weeks. I should have been building this years ago instead of letting her take yours." The box was beautiful, exact dimensions of the one my husband had built 40 years ago. The one Tiffany threw away at the wedding. Simon sat down, finally meeting my eyes. "I was a fool, Ma, blind, selfish. She told me you were slipping, that you needed help, that taking over was the kind thing to do. And I wanted to believe her because it was easier than asking you the truth." He opened the box. Inside, documents he'd recovered from Tiffany's files, my original property deed, insurance policies, photos of my husband in his uniform, letters from former students. "I filed for divorce," he said, "and I'm testifying against her, for you, for everyone she hurt." I reached across the table, took his hand. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a start. "You ignored the warning signs," I said, "but you're facing them now. That takes courage." He nodded, tears rolling down his face. "I'm so sorry, Ma." At the bottom of the box, under the papers, I found a photo, my husband's funeral, 4 years ago, and there, in the background, half hidden by mourners, was Tiffany. I turned it over. The date stamp, 4 months before Simon claimed he'd met her at a coffee shop. She'd been watching, planning, waiting for the right moment to strike. Inside the box, beneath the documents, was a photo from my husband's funeral. Tiffany was in the background, watching. The date, 4 months before she accidentally met Simon at a coffee shop. The call came on a Tuesday. No trial needed. Faced with federal evidence and Simon's testimony, Tiffany pled guilty to all charges. Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after the emergency court order, I was in my garden replanting roses that had been neglected while Tiffany occupied my home when Annalise called. "She took the plea," Annalise said, her voice carrying relief and exhaustion. 17 years federal prison, full restitution to you and every other victim, cooperation against the Kansas City ring. I sat down on the garden bench. Let the phone rest against my ear. 17 years. "What does cooperation mean?" I asked. "She's giving up names, bank accounts, communication records, everything she knows about the document mill and the people running it. In exchange, she avoids a trial and a longer sentence. 17 years. Tiffany would be in her 50s when she got out. I'd be in my late 80s if I was still here." "The Kansas City operation is shut down," Annalise continued. "Federal agents seized their servers, froze accounts, and arrested the main operators. Your case was the key that unlocked everything." I thought about the other women, the 12 names on Darius's spreadsheet, Doris Patterson, who didn't survive, the others who lost homes, savings, dignity. What happens to them? I asked. Restitution fund. Every victim gets compensated from seized assets. It won't cover everything, but it's something. And there's legislation moving through Congress now. New protections for elders, stricter penalties for financial exploitation. They're calling it the Patterson-Sinclair Act. My name, attached to a law. Not because I wanted recognition, but because someone decided our fight mattered enough to change the system. An hour later, Agent Rivera texted, "Arrested 3 more in Houston. Your courage saved 12 families." I stared at that message for a long time. 12 families. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just arrives, quiet and absolute, like a gavel coming down, like a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon, like knowing you stood up when it mattered most, and others are safer because you did. Agent Rivera sent a text an hour later. Arrested 3 more in Houston. Your courage saved 12 families. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just arrives, quiet and absolute. I placed my late husband's military medals into the new box Simon built, right beside the deed to our home. The wood was fresh, but the legacy was secured. 3 months later, the house felt like mine again. Every room, every corner. I'd repainted the guest room, moved my desk back into the office, and spent an entire weekend reorganizing 40 years of memories. Simon helped. Every Saturday, he showed up with tools, paint, or groceries. We didn't talk much at first, just worked side by side, rebuilding what had been broken. The scholarship trust was whole again. Restitution had restored every stolen dollar. I'd added new safeguards, dual authorization for withdrawals, quarterly audits, and a board of trustees that included former students and community leaders. No one person would ever control it again. Former students reached out, letters, emails, phone calls, people I'd taught 30 years ago telling me they'd heard about what happened and wanted to help. One student, now a lawyer in Baton Rouge, offered free legal consulting for the trust. Another, a banker in Houston, set up fraud protection systems for my accounts. The community I'd served was serving me back, and that felt like healing. Simon and I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over Shreveport. He'd lost weight, looked older, carried the kind of tired that comes from facing hard truths. "I talked to a therapist," he said, "about how I let this happen. How I ignored every warning sign because I wanted to believe I'd found someone who loved me." I nodded, didn't rush him. She said people like Tiffany study you, learn what you need, what you fear, and they become exactly what you're looking for. "That's true," I said, "but recognizing it now means you won't fall for it again." He looked at me. "You think you'll ever forgive me?" I thought about that. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a process, built slowly like trust, earned through action, not words. "I think we're building toward it," I said. The trust account balance was whole again, but the story wasn't finished. I had one more room to fill, and this time I'd fill it with witnesses. The church basement was full, 60 women ages 50 to 90, silent as I opened the wooden box and showed them exactly what to protect. 6 months later, I'd been invited to speak at churches, senior centers, and community halls across Louisiana and Texas. Word had spread. The woman who fought back, the grandmother who took down a fraud ring. But I didn't come to tell a hero story. I came to teach survival. I opened Simon's handmade box. Inside, deeds, affidavits, bank statements, the forged notary receipt, and a flash drive containing every lesson I'd learned. "This," I said, holding up the box, "is what they want. Your property, your savings, your legacy, and they'll take it if you don't know how to protect it." The room stayed quiet. These women knew. They'd seen friends lose homes, watched neighbors get scammed, heard stories of family members stealing from their own parents. I taught them the warning signs, sudden changes in financial behavior, family members pushing for power of attorney, unmarked pills, locked accounts, isolation from friends. I taught them the tools, how to check metadata on documents, how to freeze credit, how to set up dual signature accounts, how to document everything. And I taught them the most important lesson: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone make you feel too old, too confused, or too difficult for asking questions. After the presentation, women lined up to talk. Some shared their stories, others asked for advice. One woman, 73, grabbed my hand and said, "I thought I was the only one." "You're not," I told her, "and you're not alone anymore." The scholarship trust expanded. We added a financial literacy program for elders, free workshops on scam prevention, estate planning, and legal rights. Simon ran the program, his way of making amends. I showed them the box Simon made one last time. A legacy isn't what you build, it's what you teach others to protect, and that no one can ever take. Your story doesn't end when they try to erase you. Subscribe. Together, we protect what matters. The flash drive contained everything: legal templates, contact information for elder advocacy groups, step-by-step guides for reporting fraud. I gave copies to everyone who asked, because the real victory wasn't just getting my life back, it was making sure others didn't lose theirs in the first place. I looked around that church basement. 60 faces, 60 stories, 60 reasons to keep fighting. My husband used to say, "The work isn't done until everyone's safe." He was right, and the work continues.